Smells good, she said, her voice still raspy from sleep. Jack didn't turn around immediately. He needed the sauce to set. Eggs Benedict. Celebration for what? For not having to pretend we're cousins from Fresno anymore, Jack said, finally turning to face her. He offered a tentative smile, the kind that held a question. Janet walked toward him, the space between them closing with a new kind of gravity, and for what happened at the restaurant. Jack set the whisk down. The hollandaise was perfect. That too, although I'm still not sure if I'm allowed to kiss the delivery girl. I'm not the delivery girl, Jack. I'm the florist, and the landlord thinks you're… well, you know. Mr. Furley is currently occupied with Gladys the librarian, Jack reminded her, stepping closer. He's too busy discussing the Dewey Decimal System to worry about my brotherhood status. He reached out, his fingers brushing the lapel of her robe. The playfulness was still there, but beneath it was a tectonic shift. For 3 years, they had been the anchor for each other's storms, the laughter in each other's failures. To change that was to risk the very foundation of their sanctuary. Jack, Janet whispered, her eyes searching his. If we do this, if we really do this, there's no going back to just being roommates. If we break this, we break everything. Then we won't break it, Jack said firmly. We'll just renovate. He leaned in, the kiss tasting of salt and morning coffee. It was a promise made in the quiet of their kitchen, far from the prying eyes of the boardwalk or the expectations of the world outside. Chapter 12. Cindy's Choice. While Jack and Janet were navigating their new landscape, Cindy Snow was finding herself standing on the edge of a different horizon. The scramble of the past week had left her feeling like a spectator in her own home. She watched the way Jack looked at Janet, and the way Janet's laughter had found a deeper, more resonant frequency. She was happy for them, sincerely, deeply happy, but she also felt the first pangs of a quiet displacement. She sat on the edge of the fountain at the Santa Monica Mall, a bag of birdseed in her hand. A man sat down next to her, wearing a tracksuit and a whistle around his neck. "You're overthinking the pigeons," he said. Cindy looked up, startled. "I am? Definitely. You're holding the seed like it's a burden. Toss it. Let them fly." Cindy smiled, a genuine, wide, snow smile. "I guess I am a little weighed down. My roommates are, well, they're finally being honest with each other. And you're the odd one out?" "Not out," Cindy corrected. "Just in a different chapter. I feel like I've been a pen pal for too long. I want to see if I can write my own letters." The man, whose name was Mike, and who turned out to be a physical education teacher, looked at her with a kind of straightforward admiration. "You look like someone who could write a bestseller, Cindy. Why don't you start by taking that aerobics class I'm teaching at the community center? It's hard to overthink when you're doing jumping jacks." Over the next month, Cindy found a rhythm of her own. She became the star of Mike's class, her natural clumsiness transformed into a vibrant, infectious energy. She realized that while she loved the apartment and the three that they were, she also loved the one she was becoming. One evening, she sat Jack and Janet down on the couch, the same couch where so many lies had been told. "I'm moving out," she said, her voice steady. Jack gasped, nearly dropping his glass of wine. "Cindy, why? Was it the hollandaise? I can change the recipe." "No, Jack," Cindy laughed, hugging him. "Mike found a small place near the gym. It's tiny, and the walls are thin, but it's mine. I need to see what my own architecture looks like." Janet gripped her hand, tears shimmering in her eyes. "We're going to miss you so much. Who's going to go to the drugstore in the rain for Jack's fake cough medicine?" "Hopefully, no one," Cindy said, looking at Jack with a wink. "Because from now on, I think the Tripper household is strictly out of the business of fiction." Chapter 13. The Rivalry Reborn. The departure of Cindy brought a bittersweet silence to apartment 201, but it was quickly filled by the roar of the Trippers' table grand reopening. Jack's restaurant was the talk of the boardwalk, attracting celebrities, critics, and the occasional disgruntled landlord. However, success brought its own shadows. A new restaurant, Dallas's Den, opened right across the street. Larry Dallas, having failed to secure the Beaumont deed, had managed to convince a group of mysterious investors to back his own culinary venture. "It's psychological warfare, Jack," Larry shouted from across the street, standing under a neon sign that featured a very large, very poorly drawn steak. "I've got atmosphere. I've got mood. I've got a wine list that I found in a dumpster at the Hilton." "You've got a lawsuit waiting to happen, Larry," Jack yelled back, though he was secretly worried. Larry's place was packed with people who cared more about being seen than about the food. The tension came to a head when the city's most feared food critic, a woman known only as the Velvet Tongue, announced she would be visiting both establishments on the same night. "This is it, Janet," Jack said, pacing the kitchen of his restaurant. "If she hates the food, I'm back to making grilled cheese for Mr. Furley." "She won't hate the food, Jack. You have the secret ingredient." "Truffle oil?" "No," Janet said, walking behind him and resting her head on his shoulder. "Truth. Every dish you make is an honest expression of who you are. Larry is just selling a facade. People can taste the difference." The night of the review was a blur of high-stakes cooking. Across the street, Larry was setting off indoor fireworks and hiring mimes to serve appetizers. In Tripper's table, the atmosphere was quiet, elegant, and focused. The Velvet Tongue entered. She was a formidable woman in a silk turban. She tasted Jack's signature scallops. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. She simply took a single note in a small leather book and left for Dallas's den. 2 hours later, a massive explosion rocked the boardwalk. Larry's indoor fireworks had interacted poorly with a leaky gas line in his atmosphere machine. No one was hurt, but the den was covered in glitter and fire extinguisher foam. The Velvet Tongue walked back across the street, her turban slightly askew. "Mr. Tripper," she said, her voice like sandpaper on silk, "I have spent my life eating lies disguised as lobster. Tonight, I ate at a circus across the street. But here, I tasted a man who finally decided to stop running." She handed him her card. On the back, she had written, 5 stars. The architecture is solid. Chapter 14. The renovation of 201. As the months turned into a year, apartment 201 underwent its own renovation. The mismatched furniture was slowly replaced by pieces that Janet and Jack chose together not as roommates, but as partners. The third room was converted into a study, a place for Jack to write his cookbook and for Janet to design her floral arrangements. Mr. Furley and Gladys were now a permanent fixture at the Regal Beagle, often seen participating in ballroom dancing competitions. Furley still wore his extravagant suits, but they now seemed to fit a man who was actually happy, rather than a man trying to convince the world he was. One evening, Jack and Janet sat on their balcony, the same place where the vow of truth had started. The ocean was a deep, rhythmic blue, the sound of the waves a constant, comforting heartbeat. "So," Janet said, leaning her head on Jack's shoulder, "what's the next project, architect?" Jack looked at the apartment behind them, then out at the horizon where the sun was beginning to dip again, casting that same golden glow they had seen 1,000 times before. "I was thinking about a permanent addition," Jack said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small, velvet box. Janet froze, her breath catching. "Jack, no lies, Janet. No masquerades. No pen pals or cousins from Fresno. Just me, asking you if you want to spend the rest of your life building something real with me." He opened the box, revealing a ring that was simple, elegant, and perfectly balanced. Janet didn't answer with words. She answered with the same truth that Arthur Prynne had seen in the restaurant, a truth that had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to be told. As the Santa Monica moon rose over the water, the architecture of Ali was finally complete, replaced by something much stronger, much warmer, and infinitely more beautiful. It was a house built on the truth, and for the first time in their lives, they were finally home. Chapter 15. The Uninvited Guest. Life as a married couple was a series of small, domestic victories and minor catastrophes. Jack's restaurant, Tripper's Table, had become a Santa Monica staple, and Janet's flower shop was thriving, providing the centerpieces for half the weddings in the valley. They had even managed to convince Mr. Furley that their marriage was the ultimate macho conquest, though he still occasionally dropped by to check if Jack was acting out of character. But the piece of apartment 201 was shattered on a Tuesday afternoon when the doorbell rang with a persistent, rhythmic aggression. Jack, currently perfecting a salmon mousse, wiped his hands on his apron and pulled the door open. Standing there was a woman in a Chanel suit, her sunglasses pushed up into a perfectly coiffed beehive. "Jack," she said, her voice like a cold martini. Jack's heart did a somersault. "Lisa Page, the one and only," she said, stepping into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. She looked around, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the new, more cohesive decor. "I see you've made some changes. Still living in the basement?" "It's not a basement, Lisa. And well, I'm married now." Lisa laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Married? To one of the pen pals? How quaint." She sat on the sofa, crossing her legs with practiced grace. "I'm here because I'm opening a new design firm in LA, Jack, and I need a flagship project. I've heard your restaurant is the place to be. I want to redesign Tripper's Table." "Redesign it?" "Lisa, we just got the stars. People love the atmosphere. People love the food, Jack. The atmosphere is nostalgic. I want to make it revolutionary. Minimalist. Glass and steel. No rosemary, just geometry." Janet walked in then, holding a bunch of sunflowers. She stopped, looking at Lisa with a mixture of recognition and immediate defensiveness.